3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
Whether you've been married 1 or 20 plus years, at some point, you realized you were married into crazy.
And that's what our podcast is all about. We offer love, laughter, and a dose of reality as we unpack this crazy thing called marriage.
So sit back, relax, and get your ear hustle on. It's time to start the conversation.
All right, let's go.
Welcome to the Married into Crazy podcast with Snooks and Lovey. I'm Lovey.
I'm Snooks.
And we want to welcome everybody back like we do every single week. You have lots of choices, and we're just pleased and grateful, thankful that you've chosen to spend some time with us. So how are you doing today?
I'm fabulous. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm tired.
You know, you can always tell when the grandkids come over because they run us ragged.
It's so funny because they weren't even here the whole weekend. But from the time that they walked in the door till the time that they left, I was just like everywhere, especially for our youngest one. Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, our blessing from above,
Little
Isaiah.
Isaiah.
You know, if you've been a longtime listener, you know the trials and ordeals that we've gone through because of him being a micro preemie, and how you know, he flatlined and all these different things that when he was being born, and the challenges that were there, all the tubes and everything else that was sticking out of him. He was like 2 pounds when he was born. It was just craziness.
And now he's built like a little baby
And
linebacker.
he's a little bully.
I mean, he is thick as I don't know what. My mom was like, "Oh, his birthday's coming up. We're at, there's gonna be a party for him. Our son is planning this party." And Keelan put on their second birthday. So my mom calls me and she was like, how old is Isaiah? I said, he's 1, he'll be 2. She said, I don't know why, but I thought that boy was 2 already. And I said, no, he'll be 2. She said, he is big. And I started laughing. I said, yeah, he's thick. I mean, he don't miss no meals. He's just super, super solid.
Right.
Super solid.
God is good. To look at him, and our friends, shout out to all of our friends and family and some of you listeners actually that reached out to say that you had experiences with micro preemies, right, and you were praying for us and for Isaiah and for our son and his girlfriend. And you kept saying that, okay, take a look at our child. You probably didn't know that he was a preemie. I mean, one of our friends, it sounds like 6'3", 6'4". And then one of the kids we've known since he was a little kid, we didn't know he was born a micro preemie. Talking about Alex,
oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And he's huge, and you would never know. And so it's kind of cool. And now we're starting to see that with Isaiah, that this little boy runs headfirst into everything, and just he's walking around, running around, trying to keep up with his older sisters. Yeah. So it was a blessing, but yeah,
we're tired.
We got to get in shape.
Well, I'm tired, so Lovey sat on the couch most of the time anyway.
Amen. So. I had my couch ministry going strong. And so, funny. We talk a lot about our daughters just because, they're still in the house. We don't say as much about our son, Kalen, who is an amazing. As a matter of fact, what's funny is that the intro you hear and the outro, the music, our son did that for us. He's a man of many talents. But one thing that he's always had in his hip pocket was being able to cook. And even in high school, he did this culinary thing. And we're bringing this up for a reason.
Yeah, he did an internship at somewhere in Stockton. I can't remember what the name of the company was.
Yeah, he did. When he was in high school, he had an internship for culinary arts over at Papa Pablo's. In Stockton, which is a really nice, well-known restaurant. And then he did some stuff for the Joe Cerna Center when he was in school. That's right. Catering, all that. And then he's like, I don't even want to. We kept saying, why don't you just go to culinary school? He's like, nah, then I love doing it. Then it becomes something I have to do. And it was funny. So we just backed off, left it alone. Full circle. He and some friends have actually opened up a restaurant in Sacramento. It's a crazy hood pop-up that has really good food. And these guys, shout out to the youngins doing it their way, because Kalen and his partners are doing something a little different. They've got this barbecue smoked thing that they're doing, but then they saw a need in the marketplace I'm not going to talk about, and they're meeting a need in the marketplace for other restaurants as well. And so they've been doing some restructuring, remodeling. It's nice to see the business side of it come up. But one thing that Kalen had reminded us of is just the different the reason why he likes to cook and why they're trying to do something different, it's coming a different way. It's like, and they love putting all these flavors together. And in doing that, it reminded Snooks and I, and actually inspired us a while ago, to really incorporate these different flavors into the way that we do our marriage coaching. I guess Snooks is just going to watch me the whole way. She ain't going to participate at all.
No, I was waiting for my segment for my part. Actually, no, I was just listening to you talk because it is true. Just thinking about our son, like you were saying, I'm while you're talking, I'm remembering all the times he wanted to get in the kitchen, and all the times, I'm like, okay, you could cook. He's big on cooking, but like most, I don't know any other way to say this, like a lot of men who cook, not big on cleaning. So he would be like, Mom, let me do XYZ or whatever. And I'm like, because you don't never clean up. He's like, Mom, I got this. I got this. So he would always, more so than the girls, would want to get in the kitchen with me. I'm kind of territorial about my kitchen. So sometimes I'd be like, okay, you just do it. And he would do it, or he'd come in because we have a big island, and he'd sit on the other side of the island and basically like almost critique how I'm cooking. I'm like, look, little dude, what are you talking about? He's like, Mom, if you do it this way, or if you cut blah blah blah, or whatever, whatever. And I'm like, you want to get in here and do it? And he's like, no. I'm like, okay, then be quiet.
Wait. He still does that to this day. So we had a cookout when we finally got the family together.
Oh, you talking about for 4th of July?
For the 4th of July.
Okay.
So it was like, okay, we got the little something on the grill. And now he's a pit master now. So he came over and so we're doing some seasoning, and my brother-in-law, so D Wells, yeah. So Derek has a tendency he's always been the brisket guy. Derek he would always throw down on some brisket.
Yeah.
And we weren't doing brisket this time, so we didn't do something simple. I think
we had tri-tip though. Right?
Yeah, we had some tri-tip, and we had some ribs and some chicken. And so Snooks did some. This is funny. Snooks did some what's it called? Seasoning on the meat, and then when she left, Derek went behind her, put some seasoning on the meat.
No. I didn't even season it because I told him. I was like, oh, he goes, you want me to do something? I said, yeah, do the meat.
Oh, I thought you'd done something first.
I was doing Kiki's hair.
Oh, because I was outside cracking up because I look inside.
No, I told him.
I saw Derek messing. I'm like, oh, he didn't like the way Snooks. No. Okay, so Derek did it first.
No.
But then as soon as Derek was done, Kaylin went behind Derek and was checking it out, and he was like, no, and had to put his spin on it. So he turned around and he was talking about how to score the ribs and score the meat. And I was actually learning, so it was kind of cool. And
it was kind of funny because Lovey came inside, and I look over, and all three of them at the kitchen, at the sink, and I just shook my head, and all I could think of was, it's going to be a big mess now.
But what's so cool though is that the youngest dude in the mix was the one that was teaching me and Dee how to actually do things a little differently, so that way there was more seasoning in the meat. Mm-hmm. And that seasoning is important. And before I go into why the seasoning is important, I do want to remind everybody and ask everyone to wherever you're listening to the podcast, wherever you're getting the downloads, make sure you subscribe. Go there and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a single episode. Mm-hmm. And we do encourage you to go back. This is episode 150, I believe, if our timing is correct. And that means that there's 149 other ones that got us here. And so that's 149 plus or 150 plus weeks, because some of them weren't numbered. But go there. If you're on Apple Podcast, we're encouraging you to make sure you go there, leave a review, leave a 5-star rating and leave a review. We used to really be on that, and people would leave stuff, and we've gotten away from it. So we just want you to guys make sure that increase the discoverability.
Put 5 on it.
Put 5 on it. And yes, we're talking about stars.
5.
If you want to put 5 on something else, that's on you. But right? No, but we want to encourage you to do that. So here's the other thing.
So, okay, go ahead.
Go.
Well, I was going to say, kind of like to what Lovey was saying, we talk a lot about our girls because they're still at home. But one thing is like ode to KK, as my brother calls him. Just kind of talking about the seasoning and the flavors. And you might be thinking, okay, what does that have to do with marriage or whatever? But there is something that there's a representation of seasonings or elements of flavors. It's a Yoruba culture. It started in the Yoruba culture in West Africa. And we kind of touched on it when we did our Juneteenth
Right.
Episode back in June. So the four distinct flavors are meant to represent four emotional flavors of marriage. There is sour, there's sweet, there's bitter, and there's spicy. And those are all of the flavors basically, that you kind of you taste in your food. Something well, salty too, but sometimes sour can be a little bit salty. But those flavors represent the couple's willingness to stay together through sickness and health, for better or for worse, for richer or for poor, all the things that make up what marriages actually are.
Right. All those things. It's not like there isn't any one relationship or marriage that is all sour or all sweet or all spicy.
Well, I know
Or
some relationships that might be all sour.
they weren't always though. And what we need to do
No,
is
yeah.
find that balance, right? The thing about cooking and the thing about, whether you're cooking in the kitchen, cooking in the bedroom, or cooking in life, you need to find that balance.
Mhm.
There's times where it needs to be bitter because we need to, feel that bitter truth. And it does this. Sometimes there's sour, and sour, some people really love it. Like you love sour
I
stuff.
love sour stuff.
She loves sour stuff like I love sweet things, but there needs to be spicy as well. You always talk about spicing things up. So within all these different flavors, we incorporate it into our coaching. There's an element of our coaching that we do with our couples where I'm a certified DISC consultant, and I use DISC. Of course, we use DISC, I should say, as part of an overlay to help really understand yourself, understand your communication, and your preferences and tendencies about how you approach everything in life. But most importantly, as far as we're concerned, how you approach your communication in your marriage. And so what we've done is we've incorporated these four elements of taste and this Yoruban culture into how we deal with all of our clients. And it really overlays into, the sour. We've correlated each one of these with an element of DISC. For instance, the way we do things is we coordinate the sour, which makes up 12% of the population, with the D element. That's that element of, being driven. Some people might call them the individuals that are the drivers, if you will, the very straightforward people.
So, and part of that is, I feel like when you're talking about sour, some characteristics of sours, like lemons, sometimes they overpower the food, or it's like, oh, that's too lemony, it's too sour. Like lemon in my tea. Some people only like a little tiny bit of it. I like a lot of it. But like then again, like I said, I like sour. So sometimes sour is aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
That sour taste can be so aggressive, and it can be harmful if there's not a good balance, or someone may look at, I can't take this. It's because it's too sour. So I say that because it's like, okay, so we learn to incorporate or tell you about some of the things that's going to be sour, you know, in a marriage, because everything is not always sweet, like Lovey was saying.
Absolutely not. Like when we were going through our divorce. Okay, that was a very sour
Well, we
period.
didn't get divorced. We didn't even get to the
True.
divorce.
We
When
didn't
we're
get
going
divorced.
through,
Yeah.
we were close to a divorce.
Well, you asked for
Well,
one.
I was gonna say we weren't even really close
Well,
to it. I asked for a divorce.
let's keep it real. I mean, you had divorced me in your mind.
Yeah.
So, I mean, though it wasn't on paper, in
Mhm.
your mind, you were done.
Mhm.
And there was a sour truth that I had to taste as a part of that. I had to face some of the sour and bitterness of what was going on
Mhm.
to figure out how to really change my methodology and what I was doing to ensure I can bring back the sweetness and the spiciness
Right.
of the relationship.
Mhm.
So I think there's an element, and when we try and incorporate that element when we talk about, the different elements of communication and how you actually find this balance within your marriage. And one of the other things that we talk about is the spiciness. I mean, we've alluded to it several times. Spicy folks, when it comes to DISC, this correlates with the spicy correlates with the I. Because remember, DISC is an acronym. It's the D, the I, the S, and the C. But when we talk about this particular portion of it, I mean, this is the interactive part. Just so you know, the sour is about decisiveness, And we're not going to give it all to you because there's a reason that we want to share this with you, because I don't think everybody understands or knows, and we don't really emphasize it enough, that we do offer the disc assessment on our website, and that's marriedintocrazy.com. And we do a consultation. Even if you decide, oh, you know what, we're great in our marriage and our relationship, we don't really need any coaching, because there are people that feel that way. Though we always believe that coaching is great. If Michael Jordan still had a coach, and Tiger Woods has a coach, all these major athletes have coaches. The Olympics are coming up. Every one of these Olympians that are the best in the world at what they do, they still have coaches. And so we think, I don't care how great your marriage is, whether it's phenomenal or whatever, you need a coach. It may not be us. I mean, and it's not about, oh, you've got problems. It's not about having problems. It's about making sure that you operate at a high level at all times.
That's like people that go to counseling or whatever. It's funny because it's always a negative, it's always looked at negatively, counseling or therapy, whatever, there's a negative connotation to it, but it's really not a negative thing. It's a tool, it's resources.
Right. You see these people, actors, all that, talking about, oh, I was talking to my therapist, or I was talking to my coach. People have life coaches. People that we're marriage coaches, and it's not that you need it. As a matter of fact, we got several clients where they're operating at an extremely high level, but it's almost like it's the maintenance piece. But I've actually tried to break up with one of my clients, like, oh, you know what? You're exactly where you need to be. You don't need me anymore. No, she's like, no, coach.
Put him in a headlock.
Right.
You ain't going nowhere.
She's like, there's a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm not trying to mess up that formula. So
funny.
Anyway, and we're not tooting our own home. If it's not us, there's other coaches that are out there, seek them. But what we're doing is highlighting some of the things that we do and the elements of taste that we incorporate into ours. So you can always go to marriedintocrazy.com, go to our coaching tab, and you can click on the disc consultation. That's there, where you'll actually get a 22-page document, be able to get your own disc assessment, which is sitting down and going through. It takes about maybe 10 minutes max. But you'll also get a 30-minute consultation so we can show how this really applies, and you can overlay it to your life as well. And when we discuss it, we do discuss these elements of taste, these 4 elements of marriage. So shout out to the West Africa to give us this the analogies that we use.
The Yoruba people.
But let's get back to it. So the I in disc is we correlate that with being spicy, because those individuals, let's just say, the people that get up at the front of the room to kind of keep the party going, those are the spicy folks.
And sometimes I'll just be honest, not everyone likes spicy, and so some people that, like you say, they're the ones they get up and they're the center of attention or whatever, and they're everywhere and into everything. And you have some people that are just like
everything. It sounds like our grandkids.
Oh my gosh, if they don't stop right now, that can be looked at a certain kind of way, not being able to take that.
Right. And in your relationship, come on, let's talk about that spice. Look, sometimes look, let's just keep it real. There's differences in libido at times. There's when one wants it more than the other, and the other one's stressed out or what have you. We talk about increasing that spice in the bedroom. Well, there's times where, too much spiciness is going to just really make the other person extremely angry. It's going to make them more sour or bitter because you want that spice. And they're like, I just want to sleep. I need some space or what have you. But then even in spiciness, there's times where you think about in your relationship when you're trying to move forward because of careers, you have goals that you're trying to accomplish, but sometimes you get very complacent and stagnant in wanting to achieve or, have aspirations about, and you want to spice it up a little bit. Like, what, let's, it's up to each of you to keep that. And I keep saying spiciness, but it's another element of flavor. It's turning up the heat a little bit.
There you go.
It's turning up the heat, not just on the marriage itself, but staying equally yoked. Because there's times where you need to have that accountability to where it's like, hey, babe, you know what? I won't say you're slacking off, but it's like, yeah, you're getting a little complacent. We want to make sure that we achieve the things. We have these goals for our marriage. And in order to do that, we got to step it up. We got to do X, Y, Z. We got to save more money, or we got to invest more in this particular area or whatever. And that's an element of spiciness to a certain extent as well.
Well, and also when you just made me think of something when you say turning up the heat or to get out of complacency. Turning up the heat sometimes means it's like, okay, we're ramping it up and we're keeping it real about certain things. Some people avoid spice altogether because spiciness is actually really good for you. You know, some spices are good for your body or whatever. They make you sweat, and spicy can be about being real too. You know, we have to deal with the things that we don't want to deal with. We have to make sure that we're talking and we're
Oh yeah,
getting out there and we're putting ourselves out of getting out of our comfort zone. So,
very true. You know, again, it's just like seasons. It's not like you always need to have spiciness or you always need to have that. Oh, well, what were we just talking about? It's not like you need to have that sourness as well. Uh, There's different times that are each of these are going to be appropriate, and sometimes you have a combination of them
mhm.
that we actually end up needing in our relationship. Because I mean, the other thing that we have is the sweetness. You know, when in the Yoruban culture, and some of these things, these elements, these four tastes, we had talked about it in Juneteenth episode, but these are things that you can incorporate this into your wedding ceremony as well. And that's one thing we had talked about. And there's a purpose for that because, again, all of these elements represent different phases or different um, pillars, if you will, within your relationship. And the other one is sweetness, you know, and there's a time and a place where we need to be that sweetness when you're being romantic. And, you know, you want to, talk about being all bubble gum or what have you, but this represents 30% of the population as well that are out there when we do our coaching. But being sweet allows you to be palatable. You know, some of us have a sweet tooth,
Mhm.
and that sweet tooth is because you want to have that satisfaction when things are going that are difficult. Sometimes you need somebody to whisper sweet nothings in your ear.
Mhm.
Sweetness has an opportunity to provide encouragement.
I was about to say, and also, no, I was about to say, but also sweetness kind of when it's sweet, you're like, oh, that's really sweet. It makes you feel kind of, I don't know, it's like a mellowy
It's a
type of,
calming
yeah,
effect.
it is a calming effect. And a lot of the characteristics of or some people who have that sweetness, those are the people they're they're that calming effect for other people,
Hmm.
you know, making sure that everything is taken care of, all needs are met, you know.
Well, think about just from a taste bud perspective. You know, we talk about comfort food, and there's okay, for lack of a better analogy or visualization, you know, when there's the big breakup, you know, like when you're growing through college or you're in high school, whatever, and they have the picture of the girl going to sit on the couch with a tub of ice cream and a big spoon, and she's sitting there and she's just eating straight out of the tub of ice cream. It's comforting because it's that sweetness that is providing that emotional comfort.
Okay, I don't mean to take away from, but why is it always the girl who's eating the ice cream?
I
How
don't know
come
because
it's
I've
the
done it too. I've
I
sat
was supposed,
there.
but I'm like, so it always makes it seem like the guy's never affected by the breakup.
It's just the movies. All that.
It's not just the movies because people really think that. I feel like that. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in.
No, but it's fine. But here's the other thing: too much of anything, too much of any of these elements, any of these flavors, at any given time could be too much. Everything in moderation
Hmm.
is supposed to be the way that we live our lives. Too much sweetness, when somebody's just being overly sweet all the time, then you start to think, okay, well, how sincere are they really?
Yeah.
Because it's always so sweet. Or you start to avoid them because you're like, okay, look, they're not going to give me the real. They're not going to tell me the truth. They're going to say what they think I want to hear. And that's problematic as well. We want sweetness, but we want it in the right dose.
Well, yeah, we don't want the superficial, you know. What they talk about artificial sugars are worse for you than the real sugars or something like
Oh,
that.
artificial sweetness, just saying
Yeah.
things just
So,
because.
right.
Well, it's like it reminds me of that movie. I always come back to because just so you know, sweet correlates with the S, and the S in the disc assessment and kind of correlates to stability. These are the individuals that like to make kind of the go along, get along folks, making sure everybody else is taken care of. And there's a sweetness involved in being able to make sure that everyone else is comfortable, make sure everybody's good. And but there's also a problem with that because you're so busy trying to be sweet and help make sure everyone else is taken
Others are
care of,
taken care of.
you forget yourself. And we go into that more when we do our coaching or when we do our consultation. But when you do too much of it, then what's happen? You get cavities, You can get diabetes. It become a chronic problem that creates issues throughout the rest of your body. It becomes a systemic issue. And what we want to do is, and it can become a systemic issue in your relationship as well, because if you're always, always being overly sweet, when your spouse needs to hear something, needs to hear some truth, and you're doing your best princess from Coming to America. Oh, no. Whatever you like. If you don't know what Snooks was just doing, you have to go back and watch the original Coming to America. Shout out to the originals. But it's I got this vision of her hopping on one leg, barking. But what you do is, if there's too much of that, then all of a sudden you lose your credibility in your relationship as well. And you become an enabler, and you let the other person do too much of whatever it is they're doing that is becoming a detriment to the relationship. It's becoming a detriment to, the progression and the growth of your marriage as well. So you can't have too much sweetness, and you can't have too much spice. You can't have too much sourness, and you definitely can't have too much of the next element. As much as I love me some dark chocolate. Look at Snooks. I love me some dark chocolate.
Stop rubbing my leg.
But we talk about being bitter, right? And so bitter, and what's funny is that I love dark chocolate. Snooks doesn't.
Not at all.
So bitter is one of those traits from the Yoruban culture where we talk about the bitterness that comes along. And sometimes the bitterness is knowing that we have to have a budget. It's not super palatable by itself, but when you mix it with other things, it's absolutely awesome. We provide, there's a thing called bitters that you put into certain alcoholic drinks.
Bitters. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, we've got some in the refrigerator.
Know what it is.
It's for cocktails and all that. But then you have like dark chocolate. You combine that bitterness of the cacao with a little bit of sugar, a little bit of that sweetness, right? And it really makes it exquisite.
Yeah, because some things that are very good for you call for the cacao powders or whatever, the chocolate. But also some things that taste great when mixed in with the other tastes, like the sweet and the spicy, some of the bitter. You talk about phenomenal food. I'm like, wow, I never would have thought that was bitter, know.
The funny thing about being bitter or being having that bitter trait is that it provides an element that you wouldn't normally always look for. Like, people want results, but they don't want to put systems in place. And that bitter trait has a tendency, and again, we go into this with our coaching, has the tendency to be more systematic, a little bit more cautious, but they're the accountants of the world, but they make sure that everything's in the right place. So that way everything else functions. And it's almost like that, the old commercial, super old. Some of y'all aren't even going to get this, but when you look at the Reese's peanut butter cups, there used to be a commercial where one person's walking with
the, you put your peanut butter in my chocolate. You put your chocolate in my peanut butter.
Exactly.
I remember that.
And sometimes when you combine things that normally you wouldn't think go together, you create this phenomenal taste. And same thing in our relationships. You might not think that you need more bitterness in your relationship or that bitter trait.
The truth.
You need truth. And that bitter trait provides the truth. Sometimes the delivery is not the greatest, but it provides that truth. When, like, we talked a few podcasts ago where Snooks and I used to always argue about money. And when we were arguing about money, we found that we weren't really arguing about money. She was arguing or fighting and championing freedom.
My freedom. Because for me, money represents freedom. And for Lovey, money represents security. So we were talking about money, but we weren't talking about money. Right. Like we didn't talk about what it really meant to us.
And the conversation we had wasn't sweet. It wasn't spicy. It wasn't really super sour, but it was kind of a bitter conversation because we had to face some realities and really dig deep about the root cause and the mindset we had around money. What money, it's a behavioral and a psychological piece that we had to really dig into. And that type of digging, that type of analysis, self-analysis, and deep discussions you're going to have with your spouse and significant other, it can taste a little bitter.
I was about to say that can be very bitter because there's the truth in it, you know. Um, and some people may be like, well, what's the difference between sour and what's the difference between bitter? For me, I think that bitter deals more with just the truthfulness of everything. Sour sometimes just tends to be a little just overpowering, you know.
I'm gonna give it to you just like it is. This is what I need right now. Boom,
Lovey
boom, boom.
sour.
I have a tendency to be sour and spicy more than I am the others. There's an element of bitterness and there's an element of sweetness, but more times than not, I'm leading with my sour and spiciness.
Yes,
But what's funny is that Snooks has a tendency to really lead in the relationship and in life in the way that she has her preferences and tendencies with the sweetness and the bitterness, because she keeps it real with me 100. I mean, come on. When she sat across the table and asked for a divorce, she wasn't being sour. She was giving the absolute truth, her truth, as to what she needed to maintain her sanity. And I ain't gonna lie, it was bitter. And you know, you say the things like, "Oh, that was bittersweet." It wasn't that. Well, I guess it was
bittersweet, huh?
It was a little bittersweet in that because it changed the trajectory of our relationship.
It started us on down a whole different path. We had to really look at and deal with some truths about why we were where we were. And it wasn't just, I don't want to say it wasn't just because of the stabbing or what happened. Sometimes I think about that. I'm like, where would we have been? Where would we have been in our relationship? Where would we be now had that not have happened? Um, Lovey, I always say Lovey's like the guy, you know. And for me, I was like, what the heck happened? You know, besides the fact he got stabbed. But what happened to that for me, what happened to him being that guy, because I lost sight of him being the guy. There are different actions that happened, you know. Um, it was never the traditional type of things where people break up for abuse or infidelity, you know, those kind of things. People always were like, "Why are you tripping? Your man loves you. You could tell he loves you. He doesn't treat you bad. He doesn't talk about you. He doesn't hit on you or any of those kind of things." Because we have made up that if people don't do those things, then they're a good person. I'm not saying that he wasn't a good person, but if you don't have these things happening to you, then you should just be okay. But I always wanted more. I always knew that there was more out there. Like, no, this is not what I signed up for. This is not how I'm supposed to be feeling, you know. And as bad as it sounds, I'm really happy that we went through what we went through because it got us to where we are now. It took away the fear of saying something, um, of just being quiet and complacent in the relationship and letting it just go on the way that it was going on. So, uh, yeah, sometimes you have to have the bitters and, you know, let it just, okay. Yeah.
But you know, it's funny, and you saying that, it just reminded me of the fact that, okay, so you guys are getting like a little dose of the coaching that we do, that you have these 4 flavors, these 4 elements of taste. And I had mentioned that I have a tendency and a preference to lead with my sour and spicy traits. Snooks has a tendency to lead with her sweet and her bitter traits. Some food, if you think about it, when you cook, some spices aren't meant to go with certain foods. And when you apply the wrong spice to the wrong food or the wrong environment, it just doesn't taste right. It can ruin an actual meal. It can ruin the food itself. And what really transpired in our relationship was that though I lead with my sour and my spiciness, I wasn't doing that. I was trying to be more sweet by satisfying my wife and satisfying my mother and satisfying my family. I was being sweet, and sweet's not my natural element.
Yeah, you were being sweet in the wrong places.
Absolutely being sweet. It's like you're not going to take sugar and pour it on a steak. It doesn't belong there. And there might be a glaze, but that's a different type of thing. But
I just look at a whole white sugar, just
right. But you don't do that, right? And that's what I was doing to our relationship, applying the wrong space or leading with that wrong spice, that wrong flavor. And because I was doing it the wrong time, now there is a time and a place for it, but it wasn't then. Yeah. And because that's what I was leading with, it was she threw some bitter in my way, and I had to really face it. And don't get us wrong, God was right there with us the entire way,
of course,
guiding us and helping us get through it. There's lots of prayer, there's lots of coaching, there was lots of counseling, and there was a lot of introspection, and ultimately there was a lot of change that took place. So it's not that any of these are bad, but you have to also recognize that not all of them are meant for each situation. And so huge shout out to our son, Kalen, for helping us recognize that this is our lane when it comes to explaining DISC and incorporating it into our coaching, but also understanding, and it led us to really discover the Yoruban culture, the West African tradition, and how it correlates with Juneteenth. There was a whole cascade of events that took place from our son's passion for cooking and flavors. So you never know where you're going to find your inspiration. We hope that you found some inspiration in this podcast and what we were talking about. We hope we've raised your curiosity to a certain extent to where you want to learn more about not just our coaching, but also, getting to know yourself that much better, learning how to communicate better, and going to our website at marriedandcrazy.com and taking the DISC assessment. It's relatively inexpensive. It's one of those things that you can do. It gives you a half-hour consultation, and ultimately it leads you into knowing whether or not, maybe I want to get some additional coaching. Maybe I want to be like an Olympian and have a couple of coaches, right there with me to help me make sure that I'm staying in stride and doing what I need to do to go to that next level. And I used to be extremely, I'm still humble to a certain extent, but I used to think, okay, well, why do people need to listen to us? I'm sorry, but we have a body of work now where we have so many couples and individuals that let us know that, that God is leading us and showing us how to really help those individuals connect better. I can't apologize for gifts that God's given us. Can't even apologize for the fire that God has brought us through.
Right.
Because sometimes you go through stuff so you can help people also navigate through the things that they're going through. And that's what we do.
Exactly.
So with that said, this is going to be one of the shorter ones. We're going to do the I Can for couples, which is also available on the website. But what you can do is, what this I Can does, again, as we say every time, it's like 40 different affirmations that we pull from to remind us that, these are just the little things that we focus on a week-to-week basis. So hopefully each of you will take this to heart, and one of you will adopt one each. And then I don't like mine already. And then you guys are going to incorporate it.
I'm going to make sure you do it. So
I'm going to be gone most of the week. I'm traveling. So
what does it say?
Mine says I can do the grocery shopping.
Oh, I don't like that one for you either.
They hate it when I grocery shop too.
No, Lovey is great at picking up a few items. But grocery shopping,
they hate it because they're like, and I know I should know better by now, but I'll go through them they're like, oh, we need to get, we want A, B, and C. I'll get A, B, and C, but it's not the brand that they want.
It's the brand that we want. And I'm not a brand snob, but there's just certain things that I feel more comfortable having. Anyway, so mine says I can tell my partner how much I love him. I love you.
I want to feel it.
You don't feel it.
I want to feel it.
It doesn't feel genuine
on my skin. No. That is good. That is so good. No, hey, we love each and every one of you out there that are listening. We ask that you share this podcast with all your friends, your family. Tell your auntie, tell your cousin, tell your mama, tell your granny, tell everybody to listen to the Married into Crazy podcast with Snooks and Lovey. Share it with your friends. Put it on your social media. Take a screenshot of this particular episode. Post it on your social media and say, hey, you guys need to join us for these conversations.
Yeah. And also, guys, just remember, if you are planning on taking a trip, don't forget about Mullins Travel. That's our MIC sponsored travel agent.
MIC approved travel agent.
I'm sorry, MIC approved travel agent.
And we're going to start adding that stuff to our website as well.
Yeah.
And keep an eye out. We've got some interviews that are going to be coming up soon. We met an amazing couple while we were in Jamaica, man. They had the most, I don't want to go into it because we're going to talk about it when you hear the interview, but we've connected like we said we would, and we've got a date set up to interview, and it's just going to be awesome. So look forward to that in August, and we have some more things coming up in the latter part of the year as well. So until the next time,
be blessed.
be blessed. Bye.
Bye.